Her escape had cost her everything: a crown, a kingdom, and a future meticulously charted by galactic decree. Queen Lorana of the Zephyrian Empire had traded the gilded cage of an arranged marriage to a cruel warlord for the cold vacuum of space, only to crash land on a remote, unassuming human colony. There, amidst the quiet hum of hydroponic farms and the scent of alien soil, she found Marcus Chen. He was a botanist, a man of gentle hands, and even gentler words, whose life seemed as simple and predictable as the growth cycles of his plants. Lorana, a sovereign born to command fleets and negotiate treaties, saw in him only a quiet refuge, a peaceful anchor in her storm-tossed existence. She fell in love with the man she believed him to be, a humble farmer, far removed from the machinations of empires. They married under the soft glow of Kepler, 442b's alien stars, a union of two souls from vastly different worlds. She thought she knew him, truly, until the day the warlord's fleet blotted out their sky and her simple husband drew his sword. The queen's escape and discovery the royal prisoner Queen Lorana pressed her back against the cold metal wall of her royal chambers aboard the massive Zephyrian battle cruiser. Through the crystalline viewport, she could see the swirling purple nebulas of the Andorian system, but the beauty of space felt like a prison now. Tomorrow, she would be handed over to Warlord Kravex of the Bloodclaw Empire in a political marriage that would seal her fate forever. The young queen's silver-blue skin shimmered with anxiety as she touched the neural crown that marked her royal status. At only 25 cycles old, she had ruled the peaceful Zephyrian worlds with wisdom beyond her years. Her people loved her for her gentle leadership and dedication to science and art. But now, the High Council had decided that peace required sacrifice, and she was that sacrifice. Kravex was known throughout the galaxy as a brutal conqueror who collected wives like trophies. His last 3 queens had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The thought of spending her life as his possession made Lorana's dual hearts beat faster with fear and anger. She moved quietly to her personal computer and began accessing the ship systems. As queen, she still had override codes that hadn't been changed yet. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface as she located what she needed, a small escape pod in the lower cargo bay that was scheduled for routine maintenance. The grate escaped the corridors of the ship were dimly lit during the night cycle, making it easier for Lorana to move undetected. She had changed from her royal robes into a simple maintenance worker's outfit, complete with a tool belt that helped disguise her identity. The few crew members she passed barely glanced at her, too focused on their duties to recognize their queen in such humble clothing. The escape pod was exactly where the schematics indicated. It was an older model, designed for emergency evacuations rather than long-distance travel, but it would have to do. Lorana's hands trembled slightly as she input her destination coordinates. She had chosen a remote human colony world called Kepler 442b, far from the major shipping lanes and hopefully beneath the notice of either empire. As she prepared to launch, Lorana took one last look at the crown in her hands. The ancient artifact had been passed down through 40 generations of Zephyrian royalty. With a heavy heart, she set it aside. Where she was going, she would no longer be a queen, just a person seeking freedom. The pod launched silently into the void, its small engine barely registering on the ship sensors among all the routine traffic. By the time anyone noticed she was missing, Lorana would be light years away. Crash landing on Kepler 442b. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 days, during which Lorana survived on emergency rations and water recyclers. The small pod wasn't designed for comfort, and she spent most of the trip cramped in the pilot's seat, watching the stars slowly change positions as she traveled further from everything she had ever known. When the blue-green world of Kepler 442b finally appeared in her viewport, Lorana felt a mixture of relief and terror. The planet looked peaceful, with vast oceans and green continents that reminded her of the Zephyrian homeworld. But as she attempted to land, the pod's aging systems began to fail. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the atmospheric entry turned violent. The pod shook and rattled as it plunged through the thick atmosphere, and Lorana could only hold on and hope the emergency landing systems would function properly. The crash was harder than expected. Lorana felt the world spin around her as the pod bounced across what appeared to be a vast field of golden grain before finally coming to rest against a grove of tall, earth-imported trees. When the motion stopped, she found herself hanging upside down in her safety harness, dazed but alive. The gentle rescuer Marcus Chun was checking the moisture levels in the southern barley fields when he saw the streak of fire across the morning sky. As the colony's chief botanist, he was responsible for the agricultural systems that kept the small settlement of New Harmony alive. The sight of what was obviously a crashing spacecraft sent him running toward the impact site, his emergency medical kit bouncing against his hip as he jogged across the fields. He found the small escape pod half buried in a furrow it had carved through his carefully tended crops. Smoke was rising from the damaged hull, and Marcus could hear someone moving inside. Without hesitation, he began working to pry open the jammed hatch. When the door finally gave way, Marcus found himself looking at the most beautiful being he had ever seen. The unconscious woman had silver-blue skin that seemed to glow with an inner light, and her long white hair flowed like silk around her shoulders. But what struck him most was how young and vulnerable she looked, despite clearly being from an advanced alien civilization. Marcus carefully extracted her from the wreckage, noting several injuries that needed immediate attention. He had seen enough trauma during his previous life to recognize the signs of severe shock and dehydration. Working quickly, he administered basic first aid before carefully lifting her in his arms and carrying her back to his small farmhouse. Recovery and revelation Lorana awakened slowly, her consciousness returning like the gentle tide of a peaceful sea. The first thing she noticed was the smell, not the sterile recycled air of a spaceship, but something warm and organic, like growing things and fresh bread. As her vision cleared, she found herself lying in a simple but comfortable bed in what appeared to be a human dwelling. Soft sunlight streamed through windows made of actual transparent material rather than the energy fields used on Zephyrian ships. The walls were decorated with images of plants and landscapes, and shelves lined with books, real physical books, printed on paper. A gentle voice spoke from nearby. "You're awake. Good. I was beginning to worry about that head injury." Lorana turned to see a human male sitting in a chair beside the bed. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with kind brown eyes and black hair that was slightly unkempt. He was wearing simple work clothes and had dirt under his fingernails, suggesting he worked with his hands. But what struck her most was the genuine concern in his expression. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said softly. "I found you crashed in my fields yesterday morning. You've been unconscious for almost 30 hours. I am..." Lorana paused, realizing she had to be careful about revealing her identity. "My name is Lorana. Thank you for helping me." Marcus smiled, and Lorana felt something flutter in her chest at the warmth of it. "Of course. Anyone would have done the same. Are you feeling strong enough to eat something? You need to regain your strength." Learning human ways over the following weeks, Lorana slowly recovered her strength while staying in Marcus's small but comfortable home. She quickly learned that he lived alone on the outskirts of New Harmony, a human colony of about 3,000 people who had come to Kepler for 42, be seeking a simple agricultural life away from the overcrowded worlds of human space. Marcus worked as the colony's botanical specialist, responsible for developing and maintaining the crops that fed the settlement. His home was filled with growing things, from food plants to beautiful flowers that served no purpose except to bring joy. Lorana had never seen anything like his garden, where dozens of species from different worlds grew together in harmonious abundance. "On my world, we grow food in sterile laboratories," Lorana told him one evening as they walked through his greenhouse. "Everything is controlled and measured. But this is alive." Marcus picked a ripe tomato from a nearby vine and offered it to her. "That's the difference between survival and living," he said. "My people learned long ago that we need more than just calories to thrive. We need beauty, variety, the connection to growing things." As days passed, Lorana found herself drawn not just to the peaceful life Marcus lived, but to the man himself. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. Unlike the nobles of her court who schemed and plotted for advantage, Marcus seemed genuinely content with his simple life. He asked for nothing from her except companionship and was endlessly patient as she learned about human culture. Hidden depths, but Lorana began to notice things about Marcus that didn't quite fit with his humble farmer persona. His medical knowledge was far more advanced than someone would need just to treat crop diseases. The books on his shelves included advanced texts on strategy, engineering, and what appeared to be military history. And sometimes, late at night, she would catch him staring at the stars with an expression of deep sadness. One evening, as they shared dinner on his porch, Lorana decided to ask about his past. Marcus, how did you come to be here on Kepler for 42b? You seem like someone who could succeed anywhere. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the sunset. Sometimes success and happiness aren't the same thing, he finally said. I had a different life once back on Earth, but I made some choices that meant I couldn't stay in that world anymore. So I came here looking for peace. What kind of choices? Lorana pressed gently. The kind where you have to decide between following orders and following your conscience, Marcus replied. Chose conscience. It cost me everything I thought I wanted, but it gave me everything I actually needed. Lorana nodded, understanding more than Marcus realized. She too had made a choice between duty and conscience, though she hadn't yet told him the full truth about why she was really here. Growing love as the weeks turned into months, Lorana and Marcus fell into a comfortable routine. She helped him in the gardens and learned to cook human food, while he taught her about earth plants and shared stories of his homeworld. The other colonists accepted her easily once Marcus explained that she was a refugee seeking asylum, which was true even if it wasn't the complete truth. Lorana found herself changing in ways she had never expected. The constant stress of royal life melted away, replaced by the simple satisfaction of watching plants grow and sharing quiet evenings with someone who valued her thoughts rather than her status. For the first time in her life, she was simply Lorana, not Queen Lorana, and she discovered that she liked the person she was becoming. Marcus seemed to be changing too. The sadness that had haunted his eyes when she first met him gradually faded, replaced by something warmer. He laughed more often, and Lorana caught him watching her with an expression she had never seen from anyone before, one of pure affection with no hidden agenda. The proposal 6 months after her arrival, Marcus took Lorana to his favorite spot on the colony, a hill overlooking the valley where New Harmony nestled among the grain fields. The 2 moons of Kepler 442b were rising, casting everything in a soft double shadow that made the landscape look magical. Lorana, Marcus said, turning to face her, I need to tell you something. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. I know you're not from here, and I know you're probably not telling me everything about your past, but I don't care. I love who you are here and now. Lorana's hearts raced as Marcus continued. I also know that someone like you probably has people looking for her, and someday you might have to leave. But until that day comes, would you consider staying? Not as a guest, but as my wife. Tears flowed down Lorana's cheeks as she looked into Marcus's honest, loving eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Wedding under alien stars, the wedding took place 1 month later in Marcus's garden, surrounded by the flowers and food plants that had brought them together. The entire colony attended, bringing gifts of handmade items and promising their support to the young couple. Lorana wore a simple white dress that the colony's seamstress had made, and Marcus wore his best shirt with flowers from the garden in his buttonhole. The ceremony was conducted by the colony's elected leader, a kind older woman named Sarah Chun, who happened to be Marcus's aunt. As they exchanged vows under the light of the double moons, Lorana felt truly happy for the first time in her life. I promise to love you, to support you, and to stand by you whatever may come, Marcus said as he slipped a ring made from local metals onto her finger. I promise to share my life with you, to trust you with my heart, and to face whatever future we build together. Lorana replied, meaning every word as their friends and neighbors cheered and threw flower petals. Lorana looked up at the stars and silently thanked whatever forces had brought her to this moment. She had lost a crown, but she had gained something far more precious, a love that asked nothing of her except to be herself. But even as she celebrated, part of her wondered how long this peace could last. In her heart, she knew that someday her past would catch up with her. When it did, she could only hope that the love she had found would be strong enough to survive whatever storms were coming. The Hunter arrives 8 months of peaceful married life came to an abrupt end when the long-range sensors at New Harmony's small communication station detected incoming ships. Marcus was working in the eastern cornfields when his wife came running across the golden grain, her face pale with terror he had never seen before. "Marcus, we need to leave." "Now," Lorana gasped, clutching his arm. "Ships are coming. Big ones." Marcus set down his soil analyzer and looked at his wife carefully. In all their time together, he had never seen her this frightened. "What ships? The monthly supply transport isn't due for another week." "Not human ships," Lorana whispered. "Zephyrian battle cruisers. They've found me." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had always known this day might come, though he had hoped their remote location would keep them safe longer. How many ships? The communication officer said at least 12 vessels, possibly more. Lorana's hands shook as she spoke. "Marcus, you don't understand. The man leading them, Warlord Kravex, he won't just take me. He'll destroy everything here to make an example. Everyone in New Harmony will die because of me." Marcus took his wife's hands in his, steadying them with his calm grip. "No one is going to die because of you, but I need you to tell me everything now. No more secrets." The Queen's true story. They sat together on a fallen log at the edge of the field, while Lorana finally revealed her complete truth. She told Marcus about her royal heritage, about the arranged marriage to Kravex that had been designed to prevent a war between their peoples, and about her desperate escape that had brought her to his world. "Kravex is not just cruel, he's insane," Lorana explained. "He believes that taking wives from conquered peoples proves his dominance over them. He has killed 3 previous wives when they tried to resist him. When I escaped, I didn't just run from a marriage, I declared war on his empire." Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the magnitude of what his wife had been carrying alone. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, processing everything. "So you're telling me," Marcus said slowly, "that in about 6 hours, one of the most dangerous warlords in the galaxy is going to arrive here, demanding that I hand over my wife, so he can murder her?" "Yes," Lorana whispered. Marcus stood up and brushed dirt from his work pants. "Well then, I guess we should get ready." The colony's response to the emergency council meeting in New Harmony's community center was unlike anything the peaceful farming colony had ever experienced. 3,000 people who had come to Kepler for 42B to escape the complications of galactic politics suddenly found themselves at the center of an interstellar incident. Colony Administrator Sarah Chun called for order as panicked voices filled the room. "People, please, we need to think clearly about this situation." "Think clearly?" shouted Jake Morrison, the colony's head of maintenance. "We're farmers and scientists, not soldiers. We don't even have weapons beyond hunting rifles." "Maybe we should consider evacuation," suggested Dr. Elena Vasquez, the colony's chief medical officer. "The transport ships could take at least half our people to the nearest human outpost." Marcus stood up from where he had been sitting with Lorana in the back of the room. "There isn't time for evacuation. Even if we started loading ships now, Kravex would arrive before we could get everyone to safety." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the quiet botanist who rarely spoke at community meetings. Sarah Chun looked at her nephew with concern. "Marcus, what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we defend ourselves." Laughter erupted from several colonists, but it wasn't humor, it was the desperate sound people make when facing impossible circumstances. "Defend ourselves with what?" called out Maria Santos, one of the teachers. "Gardening tools." Marcus's voice remained calm and steady. "With preparation, tactics, and the knowledge that we're fighting for our homes and families." David beat Goliath with nothing but a sling and the will to win. Lorana stood beside her husband, her royal training finally showing as she addressed the crowd with natural authority. My people, Warlord Kravex, expects you to surrender me without a fight. He believes humans are weak, that you value individual comfort over collective strength. If we prove him wrong, if we show him that humans will fight for what they believe in, we might survive this. Kravex's ultimatum, the Bloodclaw Empire fleet, arrived exactly when the colony sensors predicted, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a formation designed to intimidate. 12 massive warships, each one larger than the entire settlement of New Harmony, took up positions in orbit around Kepler 442b. The lead ship, a behemoth painted in the blood-red colors of Kravex's personal fleet, immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. The warlord's face appeared on every screen in the colony, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile on a creature capable of genuine emotion. Humans of this pathetic little farming world, Kravex's voice was like grinding metal translated through universal communication protocols. You harbor a criminal who belongs to me. Queen Lorana of Zephyria was promised to me in lawful marriage, and her escape constitutes theft of my property. Marcus felt Lorana flinch at being called property, and he gently squeezed her hand. Kravex continued his broadcast. You have 1 hour to deliver the female to my ship. If you comply, I will allow your colony to continue existing. If you refuse, I will demonstrate why the Bloodclaw Empire is feared throughout this galaxy. I will burn your world until nothing lives, and your deaths will serve as a lesson to others who might consider defying me. The transmission ended, leaving New Harmony in stunned silence. 1 hour to decide the fate of 3,000 people and the woman Marcus loved more than his own life. The preparation while the colony council debated surrender versus resistance, Marcus quietly began moving through New Harmony with a purpose that surprised everyone who knew him. He went first to the storage warehouses, retrieving equipment that most people hadn't even known existed. Marcus, what is all this stuff? Asked Tom Bradley, the colony's head of security, as Marcus opened sealed crates that had been gathering dust since the colony's founding. Emergency supplies, Marcus replied, pulling out devices that clearly weren't farming equipment. Every colony ship carries defensive materials in case of hostile wildlife or pirate attacks. But the items Marcus was distributing went far beyond standard colonial defense gear. There were communication jammers, tactical scanning equipment, and weapons that looked suspiciously military in design. Tom Bradley had served in the human colonial marines before retiring to New Harmony, and he recognized advanced military hardware when he saw it. Marcus, Tom said quietly, "Where did you learn to use equipment like this?" Marcus paused in his unpacking and looked at Tom with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and more experienced than those of a simple botanist. "I learned a lot of things before I came here, Tom. Things I hoped I'd never need again." The truth about Marcus China's the hour deadline approached, Marcus called together the colony's small leadership council in the community center's back room. Sarah Chun, Tom Bradley, Dr. Vasquez, and a handful of others gathered around while Lorana stood beside her husband, finally understanding that she wasn't the only one who had been keeping secrets. "Before I came to New Harmony," Marcus began, "I was Commander Marcus Chun of the Earth Defense Force's Strategic Operations Division. My specialty was asymmetric warfare, specifically training civilian populations to resist military occupation." The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah Chun stared at her nephew as if seeing him for the first time. "Marcus, you told us you were a researcher who wanted to study agricultural applications in colonial settings." "That was true as far as it went," Marcus replied. "But it wasn't the whole truth. I was also a military officer who resigned rather than follow orders I considered morally wrong. I came here because I wanted to build something instead of destroying things, but that doesn't mean I forgot how to fight." Tom Bradley leaned forward. "What kind of orders?" "The kind that would have made me no better than Kravex." Marcus said, simply, "I was ordered to use civilian populations as human shields in a conflict with a hostile alien species. When I refused and made my objections public, I was given a choice: court-martial and imprisonment or voluntary exile to a colony world beyond Earth's military jurisdiction. Dr. Vasquez shook her head in amazement. So, you've been here for 3 years, growing vegetables and pretending to be a farmer? Marcus smiled slightly. I wasn't pretending. I genuinely love farming. But yes, I was also hiding from my past, until now. The plan with only 30 minutes remaining before Kravex's deadline, Marcus outlined his strategy to the assembled council. It was audacious, risky, and completely insane, but it might actually work. Kravex expects us to either surrender Lorana immediately or cower in fear while he destroys us from orbit, Marcus explained, pointing to a hastily drawn map of the colony. He's not expecting organized resistance from what he considers primitive farmers, but we are farmers, protested Sarah Chun. We don't know how to fight a space battle. We're not going to fight a space battle, Marcus replied. We're going to force Kravex to come down here and fight on our terms. Tom, how many people in the colony have any kind of military or law enforcement background? Tom consulted his tablet. Maybe 50 or 60 people with relevant experience. But Marcus, that's still less than 100 potential fighters against an entire space fleet. We don't need to defeat his entire fleet, Marcus said. We just need to defeat Kravex himself. Remove the head and the body dies. These warlord empires are built around personal loyalty to the leader. If Kravex falls, his subordinates will spend more time fighting each other for succession than pursuing his vendetta. Lorana spoke up. Marcus is right about that. Bloodclaw, empire culture values personal strength above everything else. If Kravex is defeated in personal combat, his followers will see it as proof that he was weak and unworthy of leadership. So, how do we get him down here for personal combat? Asked Dr. Vasquez. Marcus looked at his wife with an expression of deep sadness and fierce determination. We give him what he wants. We surrender Lorana. The gambit, the colony's response to Kravex's ultimatum, came with just minutes to spare. Sarah Chun, speaking as the colony's administrator, broadcast their surrender on the same frequency the warlord had used for his demands. Warlord Kravex, New Harmony Colony acknowledges your claim to the person known as Lorana. We are a peaceful people with no desire for conflict with your empire. We will deliver her to your designated location within the hour. From orbit, Kravex's laughter echoed across the communication channels. Wise decision, humans. You show proper respect for your superiors. I will land at your main settlement with my personal guard to collect my property. Any attempt at deception or resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your world. After the communication ended, Marcus turned to the people of New Harmony who had gathered in the town square. Men and women who had come to Kepler for 42 be seeking peace were now preparing for war, and he could see the fear in their eyes mixed with determination to protect their home. Everyone knows their positions, Marcus said. Remember, we're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to prove a point. Humans don't surrender what they love without a fight, and we don't let bullies destroy what we've built. Lorana stepped forward, addressing her adopted community. I want all of you to know that if this plan fails, it won't be because you weren't brave enough. You're showing more courage than armies I've known. Whatever happens, I'm honored to call you my people. Kravex lands the warlord's personal shuttle touched down in New Harmony's Central Plaza with a roar of engines that shattered windows and sent small animals fleeing into the surrounding fields. The craft was a thing of brutal beauty, all sharp angles and weapon emplacements designed to intimidate as much as to kill. Kravex emerged from the shuttle flanked by 12 of his personal guard, each one a towering warrior in powered battle armor that made them look like walking tanks. The warlord himself stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian skin covered in ritual scars that marked his victories in personal combat. His eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence that had conquered a dozen worlds. Where is my bride? Kravex demanded, his voice carrying clearly across the plaza where the colonists had gathered. Marcus and Lorana walked forward from the crowd, hand in hand. Marcus had changed from his work clothes into a simple black outfit that somehow made him look more dangerous than any armor could have. Lorana wore the white dress from their wedding. Now, modified with ceremonial elements from her royal heritage. "I am Lorana," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her royal upbringing. "But I am not your bride. I am the wife of Marcus Chun, and I stand here by choice, not compulsion." Kravex's eyes fixed on Marcus with interest rather than anger. "And you are the human who dares to claim ownership of what belongs to me?" "I don't own her," Marcus replied calmly. "She owns herself. But I love her and she loves me. That's something you wouldn't understand." The warlord laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Love? You speak of weakness as if it were strength. I will enjoy killing you slowly before I take what is mine." "Then prove it," Marcus said, and his hand moved to something at his side. "Single combat. You against me. Winner takes all." The sword revealed what Marcus drew from beneath his jacket was not the crude weapon Kravex expected from a farmer. Instead, it was a blade that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways, its metal shimmering with patterns that hurt to look at directly. The sword was clearly of human manufacture, but it incorporated technologies that even the advanced Bloodclaw Empire didn't possess. "Impossible," breathed one of Kravex's guards. "That's a quantum edge blade. Only Earth's most elite warriors carry those." Kravex's predatory smile faltered for the first time since his arrival. "You are no farmer." "No," Marcus agreed, settling into a combat stance that was smooth as flowing water and deadly as a striking snake. "I'm not." The blade in Marcus's hands began to hum with power, its quantum field generators creating a cutting edge that could slice through molecular bonds themselves. Around the plaza, the colonists watched in amazement as their quiet botanist transformed into something that looked like a warrior from legends. But Kravex was no ordinary opponent. The warlord drew his own weapon, a massive energy sword that crackled with barely contained plasma. He had killed hundreds of enemies in personal combat and conquered worlds through strength of arms. One human with a fancy blade would not be enough to stop him. "When I defeat you," Kravex snarled, "I will make your people watch as I slowly torture your woman to death. Then I will burn this world and scatter the ashes across space as a monument to the folly of resisting me." Marcus's response was soft, but carried clearly across the plaza. "You're welcome to try." The two warriors circled each other in the center of the plaza, testing for weaknesses and planning their attacks. Around them, 3,000 colonists held their breath, while overhead, 12 warships waited for the outcome of a battle that would determine the fate of everyone on Kepler. For 42, beat at the duel when Kravex attacked. It was with the fury of a berserker and the skill of a master swordsman. His plasma blade carved burning arcs through the air, each strike powerful enough to cleave a normal human in half. But Marcus wasn't normal, and his blade met each attack with precision that bordered on the supernatural. The quantum edge sword didn't clash with Kravex's weapons so much as intersect with it, the two energy fields creating bursts of light and sound that forced the watching crowd to shield their eyes. Marcus moved like liquid lightning, his training and experience combining with technology that turned him into something more than human. But Kravex was stronger, larger, and had the advantage of reach. His battle armor absorbed the impacts of Marcus's attacks while amplifying his own strength. Slowly but steadily, he began to drive the human back across the plaza. "You fight well for a soft farmer," Kravex taunted between strikes. "But you cannot match the might of a true warrior." Marcus didn't waste breath on replies. Instead, he began to change his tactics, using the warlord's size and aggression against him. Where Kravex struck with raw power, Marcus responded with speed and precision. Where the alien relied on brute force, the human used technique and intelligence. The tide of battle began to shift. Marcus's blade found gaps in Kravex's armor, drawing first blood with cuts that, while not fatal, proved that the warlord was not invincible. The watching crowd began to murmur with hope, while the alien guards shifted nervously. Victory and consequences, the end came suddenly. Kravex, enraged by the cuts he had sustained and frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow, overextended himself in a massive overhead strike designed to cleave Marcus from skull to pelvis. But the human wasn't there when the blade fell. Marcus had sidestepped the attack and brought his quantum edge blade up in a precise thrust that penetrated Kravex's armor just below the chest plate. The warlord's eyes widened in shock as he looked down at the shimmering blade protruding from his torso. "Impossible," Kravex whispered. "I am the strongest. I am the mightiest warrior in the galaxy." "Strength isn't about who can hit the hardest," Marcus replied quietly. "It's about who's willing to sacrifice everything for what they love." Kravex collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto the stones of the plaza. The greatest warlord of the Bloodclaw Empire was dead, killed by a human who grew vegetables for a living. For a moment, the plaza was silent except for the sound of Marcus breathing heavily from the exertion of battle. Then Lorana ran to him, throwing her arms around her husband while the colonists erupted in cheers that could be heard for miles across the farming valley. But the celebration was short-lived. Above them, 12 warships still waited, filled with thousands of warriors who had just watched their leader die. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The fleet's response to silence in space above Kepler 442b was more terrifying than any battle cry. For 10 long minutes after Kravex's death, the 12 warships of the Bloodclaw Empire hung motionless in orbit while their crews processed the impossible sight they had just witnessed through their scanning equipment. Their invincible warlord, conqueror of a dozen worlds, had been killed in single combat by a human farmer. Marcus stood in the plaza, still holding his quantum edge blade, watching the sky with the grim knowledge that came from military experience. He knew that shock would quickly turn to rage, and rage would demand vengeance. "They're not leaving, are they?" Lorana asked quietly, her hand resting on his arm. "No," Marcus replied. "Kravex's death doesn't end this. It escalates it. His subordinates will see this as an insult to their entire empire that must be answered with overwhelming force." As if responding to his words, the lead warship's communication array flared to life. A new voice, harsh and filled with fury, broadcast across all frequencies. "I am General Thakax, second in command of this fleet," the alien voice declared. "You have murdered my warlord through treachery and deception. This insult to the Bloodclaw Empire demands punishment beyond your comprehension. We will not simply destroy your world, we will sterilize it. Every living thing on this planet will burn, and we will scatter your ashes across the void as a warning to others who would dare defy us." Marcus felt the weight of 3,000 lives settling on his shoulders. By killing Kravex, he had saved Lorana. But now, everyone in New Harmony faced annihilation. The hidden arsenal, everyone to the community center now, Marcus commanded, his voice carrying across the plaza with military authority. As the colonists hurried to shelter, he turned to Tom Bradley and the other volunteers who had military experience. "Tom, remember those sealed warehouses in the industrial section? The ones marked as geological survey equipment?" Tom nodded. "The ones you said we should never open unless there was a planetary emergency? This qualifies." Marcus handed Tom a code key he had worn around his neck for 3 years. "Get everything unpacked and distributed. You'll find instruction manuals with each piece of equipment. Follow them exactly." "Marcus, what exactly are we talking about here?" asked Dr. Vasquez, who had joined them after helping organize the evacuation to the shelters. "Orbital defense systems," Marcus replied grimly. "Surface-to-space missiles, particle beam emitters, and quantum jammers. Enough firepower to make Thakax think twice about a ground assault." Sarah Chun stared at her nephew in amazement. "You've had military weapons hidden in our colony for 3 years?" "I've had them in every human colony established in the past decade," Marcus corrected. "It was part of Earth Defense Force's contingency planning. If humanity was ever faced with an extinction-level threat from hostile aliens, our colonies would have the means to fight back." The implications of this revelation rippled through the small group. Marcus hadn't just been a single officer in exile, he had been part of Earth's deepest strategic planning. The quiet botanist who grew their food had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day he arrived, preparing for war while the weapons were being unpacked and distributed, Marcus gathered the colony's leadership in his farmhouse kitchen for a strategy session. The room felt surreal, with Lorana's wedding flowers still decorating the windowsill while they planned for interstellar warfare. "We have maybe 6 hours before Thacax decides on his course of action," Marcus explained, spreading tactical displays across the kitchen table. "He's got 12 ships with approximately 8,000 warriors total. Even with our new weapons, we can't match that firepower in a straight fight." "So, what do we do?" asked Tom Bradley. "Hope they decide to leave." "They won't leave," Lorana said firmly. "I know Bloodclaw Empire culture. Kravex's death has made this personal for every warrior in that fleet. They'll fight until they're all dead rather than admit defeat to humans." Marcus nodded grimly, "Which means we need to make sure they don't all get the chance to fight us at once." "Tom, how many people can we arm with the equipment we have?" "Maybe 300 with personal weapons, another 50 with the heavy equipment," Tom reported. "But, Marcus, most of these people are farmers and teachers. They're brave, but they're not soldiers." "They don't need to be soldiers," Marcus replied. "They just need to buy us time for the real plan to work." "Which is?" Dr. Vasquez prompted. Marcus looked at his wife, his expression apologetic. "We're going to contact Earth." The emergency signal in the basement of Marcus's farmhouse, hidden beneath what appeared to be a root cellar for storing vegetables, was a quantum communication array that connected directly to Earth Defense Force headquarters. Marcus had hoped never to use it, but the time for hope had passed. Authorization code. Helix 77 Alpha, Marcus spoke into the communication device. "This is Commander Marcus Chun, Colonial Defense Protocol Omega. I need immediate conference with Strategic Command." The wait for response felt like an eternity, but finally a familiar voice crackled through the quantum static. "Marcus, this is Admiral Rodriguez. We haven't heard from you in 3 years. What's your situation?" "Full alien invasion fleet, 12 heavy cruisers, approximately 8,000 hostiles," Marcus reported tersely. "They've already threatened to sterilize the planet. Colonial population, 3,000 civilians. I need immediate military support." There was a pause that stretched uncomfortably long. When Admiral Rodriguez responded, her voice was heavy with regret. "Marcus, the nearest battle group is 4 days away at best. Even if we dispatch them immediately, they wouldn't arrive in time." Marcus felt the weight of despair settling over him. 4 days was eternity when facing an enemy that could begin orbital bombardment at any moment. However, the Admiral continued, "There is one other option. Project Lighthouse has been completed since you left Earth. If you can establish a quantum beacon at your location, we can provide fire support through dimensional translocation." Marcus's eyes widened. Project Lighthouse had been theoretical when he left Earth, a proposed system for projecting weapon fire across interstellar distances through folded space. If it actually worked, "Admiral, what do you need from me?" "Survive for 2 hours while the targeting systems lock onto your quantum signature. Then paint the targets and get your people under cover." The beacon setting up the quantum beacon required Marcus to venture outside the colony's defensive perimeter to a hilltop that would provide clear line of sight to the enemy fleet. It also meant leaving the prepared defensive positions just when Thacax was beginning his attack. "I should come with you," Lorana insisted as Marcus prepared to leave. "Absolutely not," Marcus replied, checking his weapons and equipment. "If something happens to me, you're the only one here who understands Bloodclaw Empire tactics well enough to coordinate the defense." "Marcus," she said, catching his arm, "I didn't escape from one forced marriage just to become a widow in another." He pulled her close, holding her tightly for what might be the last time. "I love you, Lorana, more than I've ever loved anything in my life. That's why I have to do this." Before she could argue further, Marcus was gone, moving through the twilight toward the distant hill with the fluid grace of a trained infiltrator. The ground assault begins. Thacax's attack began with orbital bombardment designed to soften up the colony's defenses. Energy beams rained down from space, turning sections of the farming valley into smoking craters. But Marcus's defensive preparations proved effective, the quantum jammers disrupting the enemy's targeting systems and forcing them to rely on visual targeting rather than precise orbital scans. The real assault came when drop ships began landing around New Harmony's perimeter. Bloodclaw Empire warriors emerged from the craft in formation, their powered armor gleaming in the light from the burning fields. They advanced with the confidence of soldiers who had conquered worlds, expecting to sweep aside the colonial resistance in minutes. They discovered their mistake when the first wave walked into carefully prepared kill zones. The colonists might not be professional soldiers, but they knew their own territory perfectly. Hidden in root cellars, grain silos, and irrigation ditches, 300 farmers and teachers with military-grade weapons turned the peaceful valley into a nightmare for the invaders. Tom Bradley coordinated the defense from the community center, his Marine experience invaluable in organizing the civilian fighters. Alpha Team, fall back to secondary positions. Bravo Team, initiate Crossfire Pattern 7. Charlie Team, prepare to cover the retreat. The battle raged through the colony as Bloodclaw warriors found themselves facing an enemy that refused to break despite overwhelming odds. Every building became a fortress, every field a killing ground. The colonists fought with the desperation of people defending their homes and families. Marcus and the beacon on the hilltop overlooking the battle. Marcus worked frantically to complete the quantum beacon assembly while dodging orbital fire that was beginning to target his position. The device was incredibly complex, requiring precise alignment with Earth's quantum communication array across hundreds of light-years of space. "Come on," he muttered, adjusting the final calibration settings while explosions erupted around his position. Through his tactical display, he could see that the colony's defenses were beginning to buckle under the sustained assault. They needed Project Lighthouse to work, and they needed it now. The beacon's activation created a pillar of blue light that reached into space like a finger pointing at the stars. For a moment, Marcus thought he had failed as nothing seemed to happen. Then space itself began to shimmer around the Bloodclaw fleet. Project Lighthouse, what emerged from folded space above Kepler 442. B was not a ship, but pure concentrated firepower channeled across the galaxy from Earth's orbital weapon platforms. Beams of coherent energy that had been fired from Earth's solar system manifested in local space-time, striking the Bloodclaw fleet with precision that defied physics. .3 enemy warships simply vanished in flares of light as Earth's weapons found their targets. The remaining ships scattered, their formations breaking as panic spread through the fleet. For the first time in their military careers, Bloodclaw Empire warriors found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't see or reach. Impossible. Thakax's voice screamed across communication frequencies. Where are these weapons coming from? Marcus activated his personal communicator, broadcasting on the same frequency Thakax was using. General Thakax, this is Commander Marcus Chun of the Earth Defense Force. You are facing the full military might of humanity's home system, projected across interstellar space. Surrender now, or face complete annihilation. The alien general's response was predictable. Never. We are the Bloodclaw Empire. We do not surrender to inferior species. Then you die, Marcus replied simply, and painted the remaining ships with his targeting laser. The battles and the second wave of Project Lighthouse fire was even more devastating than the first. Earth's weapons, guided by Marcus's targeting designator, systematically destroyed the Bloodclaw fleet one ship at a time. The alien warriors who had seemed invincible just hours before found themselves facing weapons that could reach across the galaxy to strike them down. And the colony below. The remaining ground forces began to surrender as word spread that their fleet was being annihilated. Without orbital support and faced with colonists who fought like demons defending their homes, the invasion force quickly collapsed. Lorana stood in the ruins of the community center, coordinating the processing of prisoners and the treatment of wounded colonists. Despite the destruction around them, New Harmony had survived. They had faced extinction and emerged victorious. When Marcus finally returned from the hilltop, exhausted and covered in dirt and ash, she ran to him and held him as if she would never let him go. Around them, The colonists were beginning to emerge from their shelters to survey the damage and begin rebuilding. "Is it over?" Lorana asked. Marcus looked at the burning wreckage of enemy ships scattered across their valley and nodded slowly. "It's over. Earth Defense Force is dispatching a full battle group to secure the system and deal with any remaining threats. We're safe." The Galaxy Reacts news of the Battle of Kepler 442 be spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light, carried by quantum communication networks and the testimony of surviving Bloodclaw Empire warriors. The story grew with each telling. A human farming colony had defeated the most feared military force in their sector of space, using weapons that struck from impossible distances. For the first time in galactic history, humans were no longer seen as a minor species confined to their small corner of space. Earth's ability to project military power across interstellar distances meant that humanity was now a major player in galactic politics, whether they wanted to be or not. The Zephyrian Empire, Lorana's former people, was among the first to send diplomatic envoys to Kepler for 42b. They came not to reclaim their lost queen, but to offer formal alliance with the human species that had proven capable of defeating their enemies. "Your Majesty," the lead envoy said to Lorana as she stood beside Marcus in the reconstructed community center, "the High Council wishes to formally apologize for the arranged marriage that drove you to exile. We hope that this tragic misunderstanding can be the foundation for a new friendship between our peoples." Lorana looked at the envoy with the cool dignity she had learned as a queen and perfected as a farmer's wife. "I am no longer your Majesty," she replied. "I am Mrs. Chun, citizen of New Harmony Colony and the Human Federation. If you wish to establish diplomatic relations with my people, you will do so through proper channels." New beginning 6 months after the battle, New Harmony was barely recognizable as the same place. The farming colony had become the de facto capital of human expansion in this sector of the galaxy, with diplomatic missions, trade representatives, and military advisors arriving weekly. But at its heart, it remained a community of people who had chosen to build something rather than destroy. Marcus had officially returned to active duty with the Earth Defense Force, but with a new assignment, Colonial Defense Coordinator, responsible for ensuring that human settlements throughout the galaxy had the means to protect themselves. It was work that let him combine his military expertise with his love of building and growing things. Lorana had found her own calling as humanity's first interspecies relations specialist, using her royal diplomatic training and personal experience with multiple alien cultures to help navigate the complex political landscape that humanity now found itself part of. But at the end of each day, they were still just Marcus and Lorana, husband and wife, tending their garden together and watching the sunset over the valley they had fought to save. The garden grows on a quiet evening almost a year after Kravex's death. Marcus and Lorana sat together on their porch, watching their neighbors work in the fields that had been battlegrounds not so long ago. The scars of war were healing, covered by new growth and new hope. "Do you ever regret it?" Lorana asked, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. "Giving up your quiet life for all this responsibility?" Marcus considered the question while watching children from a dozen different species play together in the community park where enemy dropships had once landed. Human, Zephyrian, and Craw youngsters chased each other between the memorial stones that marked where heroes had fallen defending their home. "I never wanted to be a soldier again," Marcus said, finally, "but I also never wanted to be the kind of person who stands by while innocent people suffer. Sometimes the galaxy doesn't give us the luxury of choosing who we want to be." Lorana smiled and took his hand. "I think the galaxy chose well. Both of us." In the distance, the communication array that connected New Harmony to Earth and dozens of other human colonies hummed softly with the constant flow of messages, trade negotiations, and diplomatic exchanges. The quiet farming settlement had become the beating heart of humanity's emergence as a galactic power. The legacy, but perhaps the most important legacy of the Battle of Kepler 442, wasn't the military victory or the diplomatic breakthroughs that followed. It was the proof that ordinary people, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, could rise to meet any challenge. The farmers and teachers who had stood against an empire became symbols of human potential throughout the galaxy. Their story was told in 1,000 different ways across 100 different worlds. How love had given them strength, how community had given them purpose, and how the simple act of defending what they had built had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Marcus and Lorana's daughter would grow up in a universe where humanity was respected rather than ignored, where human colonies were protected by the knowledge that Earth would not abandon its children, and where the name New Harmony was synonymous with the courage to stand against impossible odds. The Eternal Garden years later, when historians tried to understand how a small farming colony had altered the course of galactic civilization, they would focus on the technology, the tactics, and the political implications of humanity's emergence as a major power. But Marcus and Lorana knew the real answer was simpler. They had something worth fighting for. In their garden, Earth vegetables grew alongside Zephyrian flowering vines and crawfood pods, different species thriving together in the rich soil of Kepler 442b. It was a living symbol of what the galaxy could become when beings chose cooperation over conquest, when they chose to build rather than destroy. The sword that had killed Kravex hung now on the wall of their home, but it was just one artifact among many. Lorana's wedding dress, photos of the colony's founding, children's drawings from the community school that taught in 6 different languages. The tools of war had their place in their story, but the tools of peace had proven stronger. As the twin moons rose over New Harmony, Marcus and Lorana sat together in their garden, surrounded by the sounds of their thriving community. Somewhere in the darkness, security patrols walked their routes and early warning systems watched the skies. But the fear that had once dominated their nights was gone. They had proven something that the galaxy had needed to learn. That strength wasn't about who could destroy the most, but about who was willing to sacrifice the most to protect what they loved. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through conquest, but through the simple act of refusing to surrender what mattered most. And in the garden where it all began, the seeds they had planted continued to grow, reaching toward the light of alien suns in a universe that was finally ready to bloom. Chat controls Sonnet 4.